Module 4.1, we're talking about your target market and your value proposition. When you're talking to investors, they want to know that the problem that you're solving is big, and there's a big opportunity. And so you always start with your total addressable market. Now, this is the big number of the problems that you're trying to solve. So in the cook stove business, for instance, you're talking about the 3 billion people that are cooking, mostly women, cooking on open fires. In clean energy, you're talking about the 1.5 billion people that are not connected to the grid. So that is your total addressable market. Next, we talk about your served available market. So what that is doing is to say the total addressable market is a big number. Now, based on my business model, I can only go after a subset of that market. So, for example, in the clean cook stoves business, you have a $3 billion total, or 3 billion people total addressable market. But given the fact that I have a cook stove, for instance, that I'm selling for $100, then I am not going to be able to sell that to some number of those people because they're not going to be able to afford that. And so now we have the served available market. And finally, then we also talk about your target market. So basically, what is it, how many people can you realistically reach in the next 3 to 5 years? So that's your target market. So when you're talking to investors, you talk about your total addressable market, and then they'll also want to be able to see what you think you can realistically achieve over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, and that's your target market. So now that you have the numbers of your target market, now you want to be able to understand and segment the type of people that you're going after. Who are these people, and where do they live, and what are the demographics of those folks, any psychographic information. The more you can be specific around who you're targeting, the better off you are, because that'll really help you with your marketing messages, understand your marketing channels, and all these other things that we'll be talking about and talking to later on in Module 4. So you'll probably start with the demographic or geographies in terms of, you're going to target these 3 states in India, that you're going to target either rural or urban, peri-urban folks. And then you start to think about, well, am I going after men or women, and the age groups, income levels. All these things are really important for you to be very clear on, because like I said, later on it's going to drive into a lot of decisions that you have to make. In addition, you need to be thinking about why these people are going to adopt your product or service. Is it going to save them time, cost them less, improve their health? And you know more than even I do that even though all of you are really focused on serving the poor do care about status and image as well. And so is that really why they're going to adopt your product? Have to be clear, and the way that you do this is you listen to your customers. You've spent a lot of time in the field with your customers. What are they telling you? Why is it that they are buying your product or service? That's what you need to be listening to, and you should be understanding that very clearly. There's also reasons why they're not going to adopt your product or service. It might not be desirable enough. Are you communicating clearly about the products and why they want to use it, what the benefits are, and the features that they should be thinking about? Maybe it's just going to cost too much up front, and so you need to help them understand about how it's going to save them money over time. Market spoilage is something that we talk about as well, and what this means is have there been products or services like yours in the market that basically aren't used anymore? And we see this a lot with solar lighting solutions, for instance, where the products aren't working anymore. And so basically they're going to be resistant to you selling something if they know that other people have come before you, have done that, and those products are just sitting aside because they're not being used because they're broken. The other thing is, if you are requiring too much change of behavior for your potential customers, then it's going to be really, really, really hard for them to adopt your product. So being clear about why your customers do care about and why they should care about your product or service, and then what are some of the reasons why they're not adopting. And again, the way that you do this is getting out in the field and listening to customers. So here's an example of an organization called Natural Farms, and what they're doing is they're creating organic fertilizer, and then they're selling this to farmers. They're educating farmers about what the benefits of organic fertilizers, and so they have broken up their target market into older farmers in the province that they're supporting, and then young farmers. They've sized their market in terms of they've 150,000 of these older farmers and then 50,000 of the younger farmers, and then been really clear and listed out why these customers in each of these segments will adopt and won't adopt their products. The other thing that you need to be really clear about too is your competitive advantage. Why is it that you win, basically? And sometimes we call this an unfair advantage. Sometimes nonprofits will think, well, we don't have, we don't think about competition. Certainly for-profit organizations think about competition. Sometimes nonprofits don't. But the reality is that there are other choices that customers have. And so you need to be clear about what your competitive advantage is. And sometimes it's not a choice of going to another product or service to get something that you have, like what you're offering. Sometimes it's just the status quo. That they don't have to change. They'll just keep doing whatever they're doing and not make a selection either of your product or someone else's. One of the organizations that we've worked with at GSBI is Clínicas del Azúcar, and they're providing low-cost diabetes care in Mexico. And here you can see that they've done a competitive landscape analysis, and the choices for Mexican citizens they have for diabetes care is the government health centers and private practice, centers, clinics. And as you can see in both of these examples, less than 5% of the Mexican population that have diabetes are going to the government centers or to these private practice centers. So in fact, with Clínicas del Azúcar, their greatest competitor is the status quo, that these diabetes patients don't go anywhere and don't go anywhere for treatment. And so what they need to do is recognize that and come up with messages and marketing campaigns and things like that that will drive their constituents, their potential market to their centers. Now, as part of your investor deck, you need to be talking about the competition, because investors are always going to want to know that. And so how do you do that? Here's one way that you can do that, where you have this graphic that you can use. And here we just have, it's a clean cook stove example. Along the x-axis, we've got the performance of the stove, and the y-axis is the cost. And so here, basically, you as the person putting together your business plan deck, you get to choose what axes you want to compete on. Here it's the performance versus cost, but it could be ease of use and cost, or whatever accesses that you and characteristics that you want to compete on. You put these on the X and Y axis. Now, when you do this, you always want to end up on the top right-hand corner. And so just lay out the matrix so that you are basically win by being in the top right-hand corner. Another way of doing this is just basically thinking about all the characteristics that you want to compete on, and then put together a grid like we have here, laying out each of your competitors and then the qualities that you want to compete against them on. And again, when you do this, you want to have most of your boxes ticked, right, in a favorable way. So again, think carefully about the characteristics you think is important, certainly what your customers are thinking, and then lay out the matrix so that you can win. Now we're going to switch to looking at your value proposition. So what we've done here is use Jeffrey Moore's template that he created, that's published in his book Crossing the Chasm, which was published, I'm going to say, in the 80s. But if you haven't read it, you really should. It's a great, great book, even though it was published quite a while ago. Now this is just a very simple algorithm or a template for you to use to lay out your value proposition. And within just a few sentences, you talk about who your target market is, why you win, why your competitive advantage. All of this is just very crisply defined. And this isn't something that you're going to put on the front page of your website. It is a document that you use internally. And I recommend it. I've launched a lot of products and started several companies. And whenever I've ever launched any products or companies, I've always used this template. And I think that it really is a great tool to get everyone on the team on the same page. And so again, it's a very valuable exercise to do not just with yourself, but with your team. So your deliverable for this module 4.1 is to go back to look at your marketing slides in your business plan deck and basically update anything that needs to be updated in terms of your target market size, any description about your customers, and then think about if you're not talking about your competition, you need to add those, and then also kind of think about if you have those slides already created, is it really telling the story that you want to tell investors?